Morning, everybody. Welcome to the Phantom session. Last week at the end of the session, I said something called phantasmagoria. We have phantasmagoria in here, but that's not today's session. Today is Phantom. And when I go through this session, you'll understand why it's called Phantom, eh? And you'll understand how that relates to flavor profile. I remind you, get out your notes from the last couple of weeks. This has been a fun set of sessions. So, Lamb, we started off, we went to Paragon, and today, Phantom. The week's news. So, we do now have a schedule for the trip, April 21st, starting out in Shanghai, getting you all back to Shanghai on April 29th. So, that's all set. Trip price is going to be $6,900. We'll produce a brochure. We'll produce a contract within the next 3 or 4 days. Really looking forward to this trip because it's been 5 years since we've taken a group. Long past time to do so. So we put a lot of effort into this. Things have changed over the last 5 years in China, but they've changed everywhere. And so we've made some adjustments to that. We think this will be very fun because it's a combination of tea and culture in a very famous place that most Americans don't really go to. Not easy, not very accessible to Americans. So I wanted to let you know that. This was a week about lots of questions of source, of origin, and history. So I think today, based upon what type of week we've had, we're going to do a little bit of history. We're going to cover a range of about 1,200 years, but we're really going to focus on the last 50 or 60 years because some important things have happened, particularly related to this tea. So, Phantom comes from the interior of the mountain. That name makes it sound like the bushes should be thousands of years old. They aren't. The tea, in fact, this tea has a kind of mysterious history because the names, it's had several different names over the last 70 or 80 years. There are some legends associated with this tea. My favorite is that fairies at night came out and watered the tea. And this was in a particular location in the interior of the mountain called Huiyuan Pit. Fairies would come out, water the tea, make sure it was good. Fairies were all dressed in white. White appears in several of the different legends in terms of this particular tea. So the actual Chinese name starts out with white. It starts out with 100. The interior of the name changes over time. It's really hard to get the very original, the most original set of this type of tea. In the 1980s, the Chinese scientists actually confused everything by creating a tea. And by the way, that's what we're going to have today. It has its source and origin in the original hybrid, but it's a further hybrid. And that had a number associated with it, which is useless to call out because you'll never remember that number. I never remember the numbers. And they used Reixiang as the name for this. Why they did that, I'm not quite sure. But it really confused the whole world of tea surrounding this very special varietal. Huiyuan Pit is the home of many very special varietals. And over the years, you've had more and then you've had less. And there's a variety of reasons associated with that, mostly related to government policy. So, and today I'm going to read you a little something, but not quite yet. I'm going to read you a piece of poetry about tea from this area. And I thought that that would be interesting. One of the reasons, or one of the things about government policy, what happens when a new dynasty comes to power? Well, they're all happy, they're consolidating power, and usually they're poor because they've spent so much money getting into power and they battled and done this thing and done that thing, and then they're in power. And then, hey, we're poor. Well, what do? You raise the taxes. And that's exactly what happened because this tea, when the Qing dynasty came into being, was already well known. It's been well known probably since the Tang dynasty. And so they started charging huge taxes in the Wuyi Mountains. So this led to a decline in production because as a farmer, it's like, I'm going to grow this tea and you're going to charge me almost 100% in taxes? Maybe I shouldn't be growing this tea. In fact, maybe I should be angry. Maybe I should cut down tea bushes just to show my displeasure. 1650, that's exactly what happened. And so you have historians writing about that period, talking about how Wuyi Mountains had a different look than it did today. So the water dried up, tea production dried up. Now, realizing that these writers, like many historical writers, exaggerated. The Nine Bins River did not completely dry up. I guarantee you that. It may have been less than it was, but it didn't completely dry up. Certainly not all the bushes were cut down. But this tells you why. So many times people ask me, and in fact, yesterday somebody asked me, what about the ancient tree in the Wuyi Mountains? There isn't any ancient tree in Wuyi Mountains. Ancient if you define it from 800 to 1,000 years old. There's none of that as far as we know. You do have old bushes, but you don't have ancient bushes. And part of it is this cycle of dynastic change and how it affected this very, very famous area. If this area hadn't been famous, say, okay, let's look back at Ailao. Ailao and Yunnan. Dynastic control, slim or none. Okay, new dynasty comes to power. Do they care down there? Not really. Are taxes being successfully collected down there? Not really. So the result is everybody's rhythm of life, the rhythm of tea trees, all that stays solid. In areas where they weren't sending tribute tea to the emperor, everything stays solid because the imperial tax producers, they're not producers, collectors, they look for the famous places. And that's where the tribute tea has been sent from. And they go to those places. Hey, where's my share? All right, so that's what changed in 1650 and did affect the Wuyi Mountains even to this day, although hard to see. So let's go back a little bit older. I want to read you some poetry because when I came across this thing was remarkable. Everybody talks about the Tang Dynasty and the Wuyi Mountains and the tea being famous and it being sent as tribute. Most of the time, history in the old days, what do I mean by the old days? 20 years ago, 20 or 30 years ago, written by people who looked at the main documentation. They didn't look at, in quotes, the small documents. What do I mean by that? Chinese imperial or dynastic historians wrote history. And that was taken as the Bible, the guideline. This is how history really occurred. Actually, like the Bible. Thou shalt, In fact, when you go down to the local histories, you get a much richer and sometimes different story. So there's a poem here There's a letter first. So one official from the Fujian area writes a letter to the to the emperor and says the following. And it's talking about the teas that are sent as tribute. And by the way, were they sending Wuyi Wulong tea in the Tang Dynasty? This is a trick question because you all know, of course, they weren't, because Wuyi Wulong tea hadn't been invented yet. They were sending green tea. All right, and the letter to the minister states, these teas are picked during thunderstorms and processed with water. Um, you're all wondering because you're thinking about, gosh, that's not how you told us before that tea was processed. We'll get to that in a minute. Let's finish this letter. They come from a land of emerald waters and crimson mountains, a product of moonlit streams and cloud shrouded caves. Do not treat them lightly. So I like this just because this local official who sent this letter with the tea was trying to exaggerate the importance of this tea and link it to nature and spirituality. It wasn't picked during thunderstorms. That's foolish. And it wasn't processed with water. Also foolish. However, it sounded good. So let's go to a poem that comes about 100 years later, still during the Tang Dynasty. Now, this one's interesting. This was written by a student who went to Chang'an, which is today called Xi'an, and passed the examinations to become an official. And he wrote a poem thanking the people who created the imperial examination. And it's as follows. And it's entitled, Thanking the Minister for the Gift of Wax-Coated Tea. Here's the poem. In the warm spring of Wuyi, it's a good start. When the moon is full, great start. New buds are picked and offered to the earth immortals. Okay, I'm going to finish the poem, but let's, have some little commentary right here. Did they pick at night in the moonlight? The answer is no. But, it's creative. It gives you the sense that this is really special. So it's okay to write this. It's not okay to take this as this is how we process it. All right. Flying magpies imprint fragrant wax slices, and crying monkeys run across the stream in magnolia boats. Very creative. And the way this was translated, by the way, if I had been translating this, I would have translated different. But I'm not an expert. I'm an understudy. So experts, translated this. I certainly wouldn't have said imprint, this is the magpies, imprint fragrant wax slices. What they're trying to say when you look at the original text is you could see the reflections of magpies on the waxy leaves. Gold troughs grind fragrant powder, and ice bowls lightly hold the emerald smoke. The gift is deeply appreciated. Oh no, that's still part of his poem. Knowing its uniqueness, it is best brewed in the evening with water from the northern mountains. All right. Poets are given great leeway and license in describing things. You and I know that the water wasn't inherently emerald, or if it was emerald, it was because of leaves in it or because of some other factor of nature. But this was the style of the day to write about what was going on in the Tang Dynasty. And these guys used all these fancy words. And by the way, this is one of the issues with Google Translate. So I'm now here. Just a minute ago, I was 1,200 years ago. I'm now here right now because I'm talking about Google Translate. They didn't have that back then. Google Translate has done a fabulous service for the whole world when it comes to today's colloquial language. You go somewhere, you hold your phone out, the person speaks into it, you look at it, oh, you said this tea is really great. Yeah. And you write in your language, yeah, this tea is, I agree. And it works great for that. So I ask you this. What about for classic languages? Do you think Google Translate is any good for that? The answer would be no. And one of the reasons the translation of this is so poor is because it probably used some search engine, not search engine, but some translation engine, and that's why it came out that way. But you still get the sense that they really loved the tea, even when it was being done as green tea. And remember, what type of green tea was it being done at that time? Matcha. It was done in cakes, chipped off, mortar and pestle, and served as matcha. So that is some history, a look back.
You said that there was an official, one of the things that you read to us was an official waxing poetic about the area. What was the incentive for the official? We know that.
Oh, great question. So why in the world, as we know, officials today are very busy doing lots of important things. Do officials today write poetry and wax poetic about the good things that are going on? Like, oh, it's a great day because Sunday we're going to start charging for parking. Oh, wait a minute. That wouldn't be a good thing to write in a poem. The reason officials did that at that time was to show off their skills as that was seen as one of the, if you were going to be an official, that was seen as a skill. If you were a good poet, hey, this person must be a good official. And they can make good judgments. So officials needed certain, when they were studying for the test, they had to know how to write calligraphy. That was one of the things. If your handwriting was bad, you couldn't make it as an official. That's the first thing. If you couldn't write good poetry, oh, well, maybe we'll send you to Yunnan, very close to the border. You can do your bad poetry there. But if you did good poetry, if you understood the classics and your calligraphy was beautiful, then you got high marks in an important area. In addition to that, what else did you have to know? You did have to know, okay, what did the Taoists believe? What did the Confucianists believe? What did the Mohists believe? All the lines of philosophy. You had to know this stuff. So that's why when we think of officials at that time, it's a whole different set of standards. And so writing a poet like this, the official, the newly minted official was trying to show off, hey, I've got great skills. And hey, Emperor, you can rely on me. I'll report back correctly. I'll be fair in my judgments. I'll administer things the way you want them. And I'll collect those taxes in the appropriate manner. So this was all part and parcel of what it meant to be an official at that time. Great question, by the way. All right. So let's move up to today because I wanted to give you a little bit of source material about the Wuyi Mountains and about philosophy and about this particular tea. This particular tea, extremely rare. It comes from a location that over the years, lots of selection. What do I mean by that? There was natural selection, so it had to be hardy. There was human selection. If it wasn't producing a lot, they weren't planting that stuff. And then there was some hybridization. And so it's come up with this tea today. What are the characteristics of this tea? Well, first off, it's done in a very classic Wuyi style. 26, 27 steps, very complicated. Since it grows in this area, let's take a look a little bit at its chemical components. It has 4 times as many, almost 5 times as many polyphenols as amino acids. And you see, when I say that, it sounds like I know stuff. But what's really important to you to know for you to know, is that actually, because of where it grows, it's become over the years immune to cold. So when it snows occasionally up there, it doesn't damage it. So that thing is very important. And because of that particular location, it gets good sunlight. And therefore, that 5-to-1 ratio in that context makes a difference. Because what that's typically going to mean is that it's going to be aromatic. It's going to have probably some interesting fragrances. So that's why I go through that explanation. Yes.
One of the photos Peter asks shows the tea plants in a descending ravine. Does this channel a lot of water in the rainy season?
Oh, great question. So Peter analyzed carefully the photos that we sent along yesterday, and he notes correctly, hey, there's some plants in the ravine. The way water works here in California is if it rains a lot, there's a lot of water in the ravine. And you would be right. There is a lot of water in this ravine. And this is in agreement with what I talked about last week, where I talked about the tea that grows in ravines. The leaves are waxier, they hold more moisture, and usually less fragrant. And it's harder to process those leaves. The leaves of today's tea actually got more of the sunlight on the mountain itself. So they aren't as waxy. They are waxy. These leaves are interesting because in their natural state, they're deeply serrated. And again, they have a great tolerance to withstand cold. And by the way, this is why I think all these legends about fairies and seeing little sprites, this is where I think that these legends came from, because somehow the ability to withstand snows and still produce at a high rate, this is really special about this tea. All right. I think as an introduction, yeah, I think I'm going to stop there because I'm really thirsty now that I've talked about all these things. And we're going to talk today, once I get on the other side, about intensity, because all of you are at a place now where, as we're talking about these teas, lots of things you already are able to shortcut. You understand a Wuyi Cliff tea is going to have a particular profile. What we've not talked about is order of flavor or intensity. And we need to talk about that now because we're in this series. And after today, we still have 3 more great cliff teas. And if we're able to start thinking about this, then instead of the 1%ers, you'll be the 1/2 percenters or the 99.5%ers. All right, enough of that. I'm going to switch to the other side. I'm going to see if I can find a tea master in the house and see if we can't get this demonstrated and brewed. And then I'm also going to talk to you about intensity. All right. I'm doing a pregnant pause here because when I introduce people, it's always nice to do a pregnant pause. It is so nice when I get to do work with somebody else in red, whose red is even brighter than this dark red that I'm wearing. and whose red represents the good luck, the knowledge, the intensity. Oh, wait a minute. That's not what I meant by intensity. Well, let me stop there. The tea master, Bijou.
Hey, good morning. Yeah, 早上好. We do Wuyi Mountain tea. It's a 岩茶. Yeah. So today is special, huh? So I'm really excited. It's a holiday. Our Christmas. Yeah. And then close by New Year. Close by Chinese New Year too. So I will write. Wake up. Yes. Okay. Today so you can see, so it's special job. So I do, yeah. Okay. So all the.
Oh, okay. Okay,
So
got it.
it's all.
Okay. All right. Your setup doesn't have to have 6 glasses. It doesn't have to have 6 pots. All you need is 1 pot and 1 glass and 1 tea toy. Well, you don't even technically need a tea toy, but a tea toy would bring you good luck. We're going to brew a lot of cups of tea apparently this morning. So we need all of this paraphernalia. So we're going to go through the usual process. We have a couple tea trays out. We have the pots out. These are Ishin clay pots. It is important. So somebody asked me this week, why should this is somebody new to the tea world. Why should I spend X number of dollars to purchase an Ishin teapot? And we'll talk about that in a minute. Let's see what the tea master does. This ought to be fun today. Very fancy. Pouring water on top of the teapots. Wow, these teapots are magic. They absorb. Oh, no, I guess not. We have to take the tops off. Okay. So it looks like we're heating both the outside and the inside of the pot. Why is this important? Oolong tea makes the best oolong, if the tea is any good, when the pot is uniformly hot, 200-degree water. If you make a mistake with Cliff teas, unlike all the other categories of teas, err on the side of hot. Do not err on the side of cool. I mean, you won't destroy the tea if you make it too cool. You just won't get such an interesting brew. So she pours the water in all the glasses as well, heating the glasses, make sure they're all clean. Gosh, it really looks like we're going to have a party here. So many cups of tea. I love it that my production crew has grown so large. This must mean I'm becoming more popular. The one thing to notice about Bijou is that she has a rhythm, whether she's making it for 1 person or 6 people. Does that rhythm change? And the answer would be no, it does not change. That rhythm is her particular rhythm. It's a rhythm that allows her to pay attention to detail and make sure that everything is brewed in the best possible way. Now, I want you to note something too, because normally we don't point out errors. An error just occurred, but you didn't really realize it. And the error that occurred is 1 pot's had tea liquid. And by having this rhythm, she discovered, because the weight in her hand was, oh my God, This isn't the right weight. And she made that small adjustment just as if she had planned to do that from the very start. If only I could learn this rhythm. All right, Tea Master putting the tea leaves carefully into the pots. And you notice she takes pains not to touch the leaves with her hands because this way there's no possibility of having any of the lotion or any of the other things that people have on their hands from changing the character of the tea leaves. Just nice and rhythmic. Not in a hurry. Making sure it gets done correctly. Shaking the leaves. Not so much for the act of shaking, but for making sure that the heat is distributed. All right, and she's going to draw 200-degree water. Not in a hurry, just nice and steady. So this really does give you an idea that if you're having a party, a group of people over, this is how you would handle it. And there's no panic involved here. There's no sense of over urgency or under urgency. There's the right pace. And that's what you're seeing today, the right pace with a larger volume of cups of tea. All righty, drawing water from the water towers and getting ready to start the process. And this is a 3-minute brew. You notice just a steady pour, not in a hurry. And just really being present. That's the thing that impresses me about Bijou as she goes through her routine. And everybody's speed is different, but the routine and being present is not different. That is identical. When you get to brew at an excellent level, that's exactly. You're present, you're paying attention. Oh, you have it? Okay. And we have 2 more pots here. Yes, I already did it. All right. Terrific. Okay. Pouring water on the outside of the pots. Yes.
Peter observes, I'm guessing here, but I'm observing that the roasted, but it looks as if the leaves here were roasted less than the leaves last week.
Great start.
From some other flip teas, he didn't say last week, some other flip teas.
Okay, this is a great start. The reason this appears roasted less, and it is roasted less. So let's first affirm. Great comment. But then let's further talk about why it looks so obviously less roasted. And that's because the color inherently of the leaves is a little different. They're greenish yellow. Okay, your first one. Got it. And so that's what makes the difference, because the leaf, it's just like with Captivating or Burnished Crown, both of those teas have yellow leaves. And even if unless you burnt it to a crisp, they're all going to look a little lighter. Great catch. And you notice, even as she's doing this trick of 6 cups at a time, I'll tell you, real steady here. God, that thing looks beautiful. Now, for those of you at home, when you do this, you don't need 6 cups, not unless you have a house full of people. We're doing this again to demonstrate how this can be done in a being present style without being nervous, without losing control of the cycle. Mm, that's true. I can smell this all the way over here. Mhm.
类似笔，
好，
这是有历史，这是有历史，
这个 okay
这是那
okay
到时 K
okay yeah. Yeah, that's okay. Mm-hmm. All right. Tea master at work. Mm-hmm.
Jennifer observes the warm, dried leaves smell faintly of cherries and dark chocolate.
Love it. Jennifer says the warm, dry leaves faintly of cherries and chocolate, dark chocolate. Dark chocolate or chocolate? Yeah, dark chocolate. Love this start because this clearly is a tea with different notes. And by the way, you should all get your notes out from the last couple weeks because that way you really have something to compare to. So first off, let's look at this color. This color is very different from lamb. It's very different from paragon. So that's the first thing you would observe. That I'm going to enter the quality arena, and then at some point, as you're brewing, I'm going to talk about intensity. So this is a 200-degree inhalation. It's very hot. So when you do this, you be careful. You're not doing it. I'm doing it right now. I'm looking for the astringency. It's got some astringency. Ooh, aftertaste. Yes, I get that. Energetics haven't hit me yet. Second sip to confirm the astringency, confirm the aftertaste, and look at energetics, look at aroma, and look at taste. Wow. Okay. There is a ton of stuff going on in this tea. So it is your turn to brew. And once Biju demonstrates the brewing, then we'll talk about intensity. And I'll talk about what I mean about that and how it will be useful to you. So make sure your equipment is all set. Yours is in bag number 3 of this session, marked Phantom. And the sense of phantom, by the way, also has a sense of some sort of illusory quality. So think about that as you're doing this tea. Your turn to brew.
We have some early tasters and early brewers.
Yeah.
Jennifer says the first sip tasted more roasted.
Okay.
More roasted than anticipated.
All right. So Jennifer, because I had set up this illusory, this phantom, was thinking that that first sip might not be as obvious, but in fact, it was more roasty than anticipated. Good catch.
Peter observes the steam is very dense and wet. I guess this plant likes water elements, even if you haven't mentioned the ravine or the snow.
So Peter says that the steam off of these leaves is very dense and links that back to being related to it likes water. This plant likes water, it likes snow. And indeed, while I had never drawn that conclusion before, it's not an illogical conclusion at all, especially the snow portion of it.
Rob observes, in addition to hints of chocolate, I get a hint of charcoal off the warm, dry leaves. Then I get notes of florality from steeped leaves. The tea water has transformed such that it smells like caramel corn with a hint of orange rind.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so from the dry leaves, Rob gets charcoal. He gets the direct sense of, oh, this has some roast in it. But from the wet leaves, it's a sense of caramel,
Florality.
Florality, followed by caramel and
In the actual
orange
tea
rind.
water, in the tea
In the tea water.
Florality to
Okay, florality, caramel, and orange wine, orange rind in the tea water. Love this catch on this because really what we're talking about here is complexity. And this isn't a single note tea. And the fact that you are parsing it this way is directly related to this sense of density that I've been talking about. So what do I mean by that? Some teas when they come in, there is a lot of flavor and it's hard to order the flavor. In other words, hard for you to say, well, it's 63% floral, 28% this, 5% that. And yet, as you become a more developed taster, you'll start to get and make those adjustments about what is more and what is less. And then you'll note as the tea changes temperature, hey, things are changing. So this is what I mean. If a tea is more dense, you're going to have a lot more of these things going on. If it's less dense, it'll be more singular note. Yes.
Alvin observes the wet leaves smell of strong mushrooms.
Oh, very interesting. You know why I love this? Alvin says the wet leaves smell strongly, of strong mushrooms. I love this because actually mushrooms grow in this area. A lot of mushrooms grow in this area. And as soon as you said that, I pictured all of these mushrooms that grow in this area. And not all the areas in the interior of the mountain have mushrooms spread around like this particular area. Great catch on that.
Aggie observes the first whiff from the bag smelled like whiskey with a roasty malt. Yes. There's more, but I'll start with that.
Okay. Aggie talks about that first whiff of whiskey from the tea leaves coming out of the bag.
Then she says the warm leaves made me think of wet clay.
Okay, warm leaves of wet clay. And I'm gonna hold that thought right there because one of the things about all of these teas is they, depending on what part of the mountain they grow, they reflect the growth of the base of what they're growing on. And this is really, really important, and hence why we use different names, because some will have that wet clay taste. Some will absolutely not have it, depending on where it's grown. Yeah.
The wet leaves were floral and caramel scented, and the florality was evident even as being poured from the pot.
The wet leaves had florality and what?
Caramel.
Oh, caramel. Florality and caramel. And even as the tea was being poured from the pot into the cup, it became more intense.
And then she got chocolate as well. So,
and at the end, is there anything better than whiskey and chocolate? Oh, wait a minute. That's not quite what she said. That was close enough, though. She really got that chocolate once she started drinking it. So this is a tea which lives up to its name in terms of this concept of intensity, all these flavors, and then forcing you to order them first as you receive them, and then as you go down the cup, what's dominating all the way down the cup. And this is what makes these teas absolutely fun. And so in competitions, when judges are talking about the teas, whether they're professional judges or amateurs or the tea consuming public, all of these are factors in their judgments about the tea. Because these teas are just simply complex. When you go through something 26, 27 steps, is it possible that you're going to get a flat flavor? Only if you brewed incorrectly. Yeah.
Aggie adds, as I drink the tea, I get the hints of citrus that others noted, and caramel comes through as well. The mouthfeel is juicy.
Love this comment. Aggie talks about mouthfeel. Juicy. I was waiting for this because unlike the last two teas where they're good in their own ways, juicy wasn't one of the things that we said about the last two teas. This one definitely has that juicy. This one, Aggie is reflecting hints of citrus, hints of caramel. Wow, this is continuing through this tea. This is a special tea. And Phantom is appropriate for the tea name. Go ahead.
Jennifer says, I have to say that even as I sip down into the cup, the roast continues to present itself strongly. I would consider this a stronger roast Cliff tea. Would you agree?
This is a great question. So Jennifer says, hey, no matter what, as I go down that cup, you're talking about intensity, you're talking about citrus, you're talking about florality and whiskey. But you know what? I taste the roast all the way down the cup. So her question is, would I agree that this is a heavier roast tea? And in fact, though it seems in the beginning, it tricks you. In the beginning, it seems like, are you sure they did 28 steps with this? Oh, yeah, they did 28 steps. And the reason you know is for exactly what Jennifer said. That roast, even though it doesn't dominate on top of these other things, it exists and supports those other flavors and allows that sense of juiciness. Great catch.
Peter observes the florality is so present and it is sweet, but it's hard to parse out the sweetness by itself. So what comes to mind is honeysuckle that has the sweet and the floral combined.
I love this comment. Peter talks about clearly florality, but in the background, weaving its way through sweetness. And it's not an exact sweetness I can say. Is it sugar? No, not exactly that. Is it honey? Not, it's honeysuckle, maybe, but it's that sense of floral and sweetness together. And this is important because in the beginning, none of you really mentioned sweet, and yet now you're getting it. Now it's floating into the picture. Yes.
Alvin observes minerality in this is intense, but not as subtle as balm, which is my favorite.
Alvin talks about the minerality in this one, and I love the fact that we are now talking about minerality because you can't miss it. It's there, and just like the roast, and he called it, Alvin called it intense. Just like the roast, it is a foundation upon which all these other flavors. And remember, I talked about intensity, so you already are getting that and starting to use it. So a foundation of roast on top of that foundation of minerality. And you know what? They're porous enough to allow mellow or juiciness, the sweetness, citrus, florality. And you know what? What comes up from that porousness is chocolate and whiskey.
Kathy says, I am finally tasting the sweetness I smelled in the dry leaves after a few sips. The leaves smelled so fresh that I was surprised by the flavor being so deep.
This is a great comment. Kathy contrasts the smell, which is very, very fresh, and so it tricks you. And it's like, okay, yeah, the leaves look a little lighter. It's very fresh. You know what? He's trying to sneak in a light roast here. You drink it, and it's like, no, I'm not. There is that roast and that sweetness that comes at the same time.
Rob observes it has a slowly forming dry astringency. It's both thick and dry.
Love this comment. Rob talks about a slowly thickening astringency. Both astringent, what did he say?
Thick,
Thick,
dry.
thick and dry. Yes, both thick and dry. Love this comment. And the reason I love this is because the very first time I tasted it this morning, yeah, there's astringency. And now as I go through this slowly, by the way, I'm going through it slower than you are because I know there's all these great things in here. It's getting bigger and bigger on my tongue and thicker. Great catch. So this is exactly the reason that I'm blessed to be with so many of you who can appreciate this tea. This is not a beginner tea. If somebody comes in here and says, you know, I've heard that there's something like Wuyi Mountain cliff teas or rock teas or something like that, dirt teas or whatever, we would not start them out with this. They don't have perspective. And they don't have perspective because they haven't tasted the more single note cliff teas. This is not a single note cliff tea. This is very complex. So you might be in the back of your head thinking, all right, I had lamb, that blew me away. And yes, it's a championship tea. Why isn't this a championship tea? In essence, it has many of the qualities of being a championship tea. It just is harder, I think, for people to understand. And as such, it's not as obvious. Lamb was very obvious right from the start. Boing, it hits you, drives you to places, and that's that. Yes.
Jeremy says, from the fresh scent of the gnarly leaves in the bag, a huge metamorphosis of scents, and now juicy swallow ability, very little astringency. Enjoy inhaling the healthy, purifying stream. So easy down to the core. So easy down to the core. Warmth, soft pleasure.
I love this comment because it identified two things we haven't talked about yet. The energetics. Warming to the core, soft, energetic. For Jeremy, the astringency backed off as it became, as she drank through this. Great comment, especially about the energetics.
Aggie says, by the end of the cup, I'm feeling very excited about this tea. Complex and delicious. Energetics I'm getting are an increased focus on wanting more of this tea. Okay.
I love this. Your comments today have been just great, Aggie. So for her, the energetics are this increased wanting of the tea, and it's warming, and it's just complex, lovely way to kind of put a bow on this tea. This is a great tea.
Rob says, if I sip this on the field of battle, the act of drawing my sword will create a tone that will fill the enemy into submission. That will perhaps will the enemy into submission. We can then all go home and watch the game in peace.
Hey, love it. You know, Rob uses this metaphor. He drinks the tea. It's scary. It fills the sword with all this energy, and all the enemies, all the Mordorites, quail. And they should.
Alvin says, I'm a coffee drinker, but I could swap this tea for coffee. How about that?
I love this. All right. Alvin wraps it up with, well, I am a coffee drinker, but you know what? Coffee's just about had its last stand with me. I can swap this for coffee. All right. As usual, all of you, fabulous commentary, fabulous insights. And you know what? We're not done. Next week, we do Black Dragon. We start the second three. Black Dragon, Empathy, and Spectral. Wow. I can't wait till next week. Now, you guys have responsibilities this week. It's Christmas upcoming, and Hanukkah, and all the other holidays. Open your presents, enjoy, have great meals, be with family, and oh, most importantly, be healthy. I'll see you next Saturday. Bye bye now.